How will the New York Giants fare against one of the league's top pass rushing defenses in the Cleveland Browns? We have that and more coming up today on the crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Browns, coming your way next.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This episode of the crossover edition Locked On Giants, Locked On Browns is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL in all lowercase letters to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. Prize Picks, run your game. Hello, everybody. Welcome on in to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Browns. My name is Patricia Train. I'm the host of Locked On Giants, and he is Jeff Lloyd. He is the host of Locked On Browns, and we are going to get you ready for this weekend's Week 3 game, New York Giants at Cleveland Browns, the start of a rough 6-game schedule for the New York Giants, who are 0-2. And of course, Cleveland has their own issues that we will probably talk about a little later on in the program. So welcome on into our everydayers, our newcomers, our insiders, and everybody in between. We appreciate you spending time with us here on the Locked On Giants and Locked On Browns crossover. And Jeff, big game for both teams coming up this week.
There's no question. The Browns, it was very, very, disappointing week 1. And, you don't want to go back out on the road week 2 and try to get yourself corrected to 1-1. This was a team that kind of struggled on the road last year. They were able to get the victory. Was it pretty? Was it something that they were going to hang in the louvre? By no means necessary. Browns have a lot of people currently out, and certainly some people underperforming at this point. So it kind of gives you a hope that as you start to get some bodies back, some guys are going to start to play more, to the back of basically their card, where the stats were when we were kids. It's kind of what you're hoping for here. I think the interesting thing here for us, Pat, and, both franchises are kind of in a similar situation. Both basically committed big money to a quarterback that maybe they are not. Either franchise is thrilled with the results of what they're getting from quarterback right now. But go ahead, Pat, the latest on the New York Giants and where they're at, unfortunately, as they start the season 0-2.
Yeah, the big thing I think for the Giants, and we'll get into matchups later because I do have one specific matchup I want to mention, but I think the big thing for the Giants is going to be the state of their, for lack of a better term, their mental health. Where are they mentally? 0-2 against two teams they should have beaten. The Minnesota Vikings, who blew them out. I mean, the Giants didn't even deserve to be on the same field with the Vikings, who looked that good. And then last week, the heartbreaker against the Washington Commanders. And look, losing, you've got to be tough. You got to be resilient. You've got to shake things off. But after a while, it can start to build up. If you're not careful, you can start to question, why am I going through this? Why am I, getting beat up physically if we're not going anywhere? I mean, these guys are professionals. They get paid. It's their job, but they're also human beings. So we talked about that actually yesterday with Bobby Okereke. We talked about that with Andrew Thomas, about keeping the locker room from not slipping away, from not becoming despondent and saying, okay, that's it. Why are we bothering here? And, the good news for the Giants is it's still young in this season. Brian Daboll, historically, last year when everything was falling around the team, he was able to keep them competitive and focused. No reason to think that won't happen again this year, but it's a new team, a lot of young players. I think the Giants are the second youngest team in the NFL. These are guys who are coming from college programs that, for the most part, were pretty successful, and losing can be something new and take some getting used to. Not something they want to get used to, mind you, but something that, it's an acquired taste, whether, kind of like eating onions, raw onions is kind of an acquired taste. But yeah, that's probably the big thing we're going to be paying attention to. One of the big things that we will watch. Of course, the other question for the Giants after last week's fiasco is, what are they going to do at kicker? Graham Gano, we all know what happened with that situation. The Giants did not have a backup plan. On Monday, the Giants worked out a bunch of kickers. They have not signed anybody as of this recording. I'm not sure if they're going to or if they're just going to roll with Jude McAtamey, who's on their practice squad. But not having a good kicker, as we saw, and no disrespect to Jamie Gillen, who tried to do the place kicking for the Giants, just wasn't prepared and wasn't ready given how everything unfolded. Not having a good kicker can come back to haunt you. So that's a couple of the top stories we're looking at from the Giants' perspective.
And you're not far off. I mean, I was watching, I guess it was, Sunday night and then into Monday night. It's alarming, and it's just crazy to think that once a team basically hits the opponent's 40-yard line, they're in field goal range. I mean, the leg strength of these guys, and I believe to this point, I mean, almost every 50-yard kick has been made except for Justin Tucker, ironically, has missed two. So that's definitely, the strangeness and the oddity of the NFL to this point. They can't throw touchdown passes, but kickers are out here like Del Curry from, long range. I mean, Seth Curry from long range all over. Sorry, the older folks, Del Curry. That was his dad, in case you guys didn't know. But, I think one player that, when you're talking about this, as far as the Giants aspect, Brian Burns. Like, Brian Burns just came here from Carolina, where it couldn't be any worse, and obviously it's not really going very well for Carolina. And he comes here thinking, all right, I'm going to get my chance here. And, obviously, bright lights, big city, hopefully a much better situation. And to this point, certainly not for Brian Burns by any means whatsoever. So now here he is again, still trying to rally himself and get fired up. But Pat, at the end of the day, the Giants are one game out of first place. It's not like anybody's at least 2-0 to this point. I mean, it's not like it's over. And, yes, it's tough when you have that going on in a locker room and you're not playing up to expectations. You're playing very well, but you have to give that caveat of, guys, one win and we're right back in this. We control our own destiny.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, the loss to Washington was disheartening, but they could have beaten them. And I think they know that they can still beat them. The Giants will see Dallas after they're done with Cleveland. They've got Philadelphia on the schedule, and we all saw what happened with Philadelphia. You're right. One game can very easily turn it around. But, right now, a lot of gloom and doom amongst the Giants fan base because, look, to be fair to them, this is kind of what we've had to deal with for most of the last decade plus. It's always been, we come in, we're full of optimism. Hey, the team looks great. And, they did well in the summer, all the positive talk. And then they come out and they don't look ready. And, I was talking with Victor Cruz on my show yesterday, and Victor said, look, with the way the NFL is set up now, a lot of teams, especially teams that are in the rebuild mode, like the Giants are, they're still using these first two games to kind of feel their way through because they don't play a lot during the preseason, which is a big reason why I advocate playing more in the preseason. But that being said, he says sometimes teams don't hit their stride until week 3, week 4. That's when you know what you really have in your team. So, he sounded confident that that's when we'll know if the Giants, if this 0-2 start that they're off to is just, the remnants of not being ready or the tail end of training camp, I should say, or if this is what we're going to see moving on through the rest of the season. And hopefully it's not what we see through the rest of the season because this losing can wear on. I mean, it wears on me after a while. That's poor people who spend their hard-earned money on tickets and parking and merchandise and all that good stuff. So we'll have to see how that comes together.
There's no question. And, look, as the guy who signed on for his first year at Locked On Browns and, had to report on a 0-16 season, trust me, I get it.
All right. Speaking of the Browns, when we come back, Jeff's going to tell us what's going on in Cleveland. So don't go anywhere. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on that rare, hard to find card just isn't feasible for many people, no matter how much they enjoy collecting. But thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, it's now possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full-grade rationale provided and explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform you have to check out. And right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonnfl and using that promo code lockedonnfl. That's arenaclub.com/lockedonnfl, promo code lockedonnfl for 10% off your first purchase. All right, everybody, welcome back to the special crossover edition, Locked On Giants, Locked On Browns. I'm Patricia Traynor of Locked On Giants. He is Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns. And Jeff, talk to us about the Browns. What's going on in Cleveland?
Well, it was a very weird summer. The Browns, as last season unfolded, as the weeks went on, the Browns were without their top three offensive tackles. The summer started this year with kind of some of the same issues. DeJuan Jones was the first one back. Jack Conklin back to practice. Jedrick Wills back to practice. Neither of those two guys have played yet. Browns, again, now playing out their fourth string tackle starting the last 2 weeks, James Hudson. The offensive line as a whole was better week 2 than it was week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. Still far, far removed. This was always been the strength of the Barry Stefanski team the first 4 years. Of course, you had Bill Callahan, the situation where, Bill was going to go coach with his son. Nobody was going to stand in his way. It's one of those things in the NFL. It doesn't happen often, but it is a gentleman's league. You look out for people like that. But I think some of the things that have been surprising, the Browns, the interior, this past Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars, Wyatt Taylor, Ethan Posick, Joe Bitonio responsible for 4 holding penalties. It's just completely unacceptable. Granted, you got the win and you got away with it, but just not well by any means whatsoever. Joe Bitonio, it does not look like Joe Bitonio right now. Do I think that it's over? No, I don't think it's over. I just think, as you're older, it takes you longer to get going, before you hit what your max is. Maybe you can't maintain your max for 15, 16 games in a season anymore like you did when you were in your 20s. It's certainly understandable. But the offensive line definitely has some issues. So one of the biggest things, and we'll see as the week goes on, because, neither Jack Conklin nor Jedrick Wills have done anything other than, basically they say they've participated. Well, until I see full, I have a hard time believing that any one of these guys is ready to suit up and start a game. You just have to look at it from that aspect. Both are coming off real serious knee injuries. So it's been an issue. Browns ran the ball better in week 2 than they did in week 1. DeShaun Watson certainly was, a much, much better version of himself Sunday than he was against the Dallas Cowboys. Was able to show the athleticism, was able to break out of the pocket. Amari Cooper, it's been a slow start, but the Browns had a very, very wandering eye for Jerry Jeudy for quite some time. They were finally able to get that done this offseason. And Jerry, it's not that, again, I don't think Amari, it's one of those things where we're, saying it's over. But when you say, oh, well, Joe Bitonio should play better. Oh, well, Amari Cooper should play better. But you factor that into some of the things that they're doing, all of a sudden you think the overall elevation of the team and the play should pick up. You're going to get some guys back. You get a Jack Conklin back. Look, however beat up he is, the guy is a former 2-time All-Pro. But you start to equate these guys in. And if DeShaun can continue to hopefully build on this, and it is weird. He is 9-5. You never want to use QB wins, obviously, for a guy who makes the amount of money that DeShaun does. But when DeShaun is out there, he does find a way to get it done. I have no delusions of grandeur that we're ever going to see that 2020 version again. I've given that up a long time ago. And I think one of the biggest things for some people reporting on this team and some of the fans watching this team is you look at the price he's being paid and you just assume what the expectations should be. This team is built. It is built really well. They have a great secondary. Their linebackers are very good. Jordan Hicks was a fantastic addition to Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Defensive line is good. They don't need him to go out there and have his name mentioned with the Patrick Mahomeses of the world, the Josh Allens of the world. It doesn't need to be that way. It does seem, again, strange when the guy makes that type of money where I'm like, look, just throw for a high completion percentage and don't turn the ball over. Everything else should fall in a line from that aspect. It's simple. It is. But certainly a lightning rod, certainly with the Browns' current quarterback. But I've come away very impressed. And it's been some of the new guys. Jordan Hicks, again, they paid him less money than Anthony Walker, who went to Miami, less money than Sione Takitaki, who went to New England. But he had the better proven track record his entire NFL career, over 125 tackles. I think it was like 4 or 5 straight years in a row. He's been everywhere, has a relationship with Jim Schwartz. He's really stepped up here. The defensive line, they're without their second-round pick right now, who is currently on the commissioner's exempt list. They really had high hopes from Mike Hall kind of being a pass rushing presence on the interior. Turns out that, third-year defensive end, Alex Wright, rushing from the interior on Sunday, basically called game on Jacksonville because Myles Garrett flew around. Alex Wright split a double team. Trevor Lawrence stepped up. It was easy peasy. Sack, throw it out the back of the end zone. Browns basically secured the victory. So this team just needs to kind of stack now. You got to leave week one where it is. There's nothing you can do about it. Luckily, it wasn't a conference game, wasn't a division game. Hopefully, it's not going to mean anything coming down the line. You just got to continue to stack things together. Find your positives where they are. If this team plays 53 as one, they are certainly capable of winning the AFC North.
Jeff, you mentioned DeShaun Watson. Obviously, the new allegations came out against him. What is your sense of how the organization is kind of managing that? Because that can be a distraction. So how do you feel that they're managing that?
I think they've kind of hedged their bets, and they've kind of done this every year, essentially. With DeShaun, year one was Jacoby Brissett. Year two, they thought they were going to get 17 of DeShaun, the injury. And, to their credit, PJ Walker won a game. DTR won a game. Probably would have won a second one in Denver if he hadn't gotten injured and left the game early. You got Joe Flacco in here. This year, you went the Jameis Winston route. And it's weird because we see so much of Jameis. And it's weird that there's a lot of spotlight put on your backup quarterback. Normally that's not the way, but I think the Browns understand, there's only so much spotlight they can put on their quarterback because as much as, there are some fans that are just going to say, hey, that's our quarterback, we're going to support him. DeShaun Watson could go out, throw for 475, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. And there was certainly going to be a large part of this fan base that is not going to forget. And look, they're entitled to their opinions. This isn't what we do. We have to report on what we see. But you have to be concerned. You certainly have to be concerned. And there is the possibility, and Jay Glazer brought it up over the weekend, that maybe the contract was altered a tad bit, that maybe some of the protection, as far as DeShaun and David Mulligeta's side was maybe removed. So if this goes to where it could possibly go, we'll see. But again, it's a work in progress. It does seem odd that they said, oh, we'll talk about this in a week or two. Like if you were that ready, wouldn't you just say, hey, we're having a news conference in 10 minutes. We're going to have TMZ there. We're going to have everybody there. So again, look, we report on sports. We report on football. As far as, these types of things, I don't work for CNN. I have no intention of working for Court TV, any of these things. So, I thought we were kind of removed from this. And this is kind of what I dealt with a lot, certainly for the first 5-6 months when he was brought here. Then it was like, all right, well, he's finally on the field. We can just talk about him being a quarterback. But now here we are again, and these types of things resurface. I don't know ultimately, where this ends up. I don't think anybody truly does. Is it something where all of a sudden maybe it's going to go away, which we all know kind of maybe, hush money, type of thing. Who knows? But it certainly makes our jobs more difficult, my job more difficult. I want to just talk about what I see between certainly the lines and how this team plays. But it's certainly something that you can't turn your head away from. And look, the Browns have faith in DTR. Did play well for them last year. I think this team has a lot of faith in Jameis Winston. Again, Jameis is a pretty focal point. He's doing shows that involve the team, which is normally QB1 would do that, not necessarily QB2. But he's just got a great personality. Guys came out of the game on Sunday, said, wow, it's great when Jameis comes into the huddle because they ran some short yardage tests with Jameis Winston. And it was like Jameis comes in and his eyes are so big, it's almost kind of like he's got a secret to tell. And that's what it's weird, but the team kind of responds. But yeah, certainly, some weighted breath here over the next couple of weeks to see where this goes, because I think the Browns, and certainly, with trying to get towards building this beautiful big indoor arena, all of the stuff and everything that's going to go on, they don't want to hopefully have to carry more negativity from DeShaun Watson into what is going to be a huge, huge, huge venture.
Indeed. All right. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the keys to each team's victory here on this crossover edition. Locked on Giants, Locked on Browns. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey, Giant fans, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular Sunday's afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman, Tyler Rowland, kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop for a visit with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL and it's twice a day. Make the new Locked On NFL your second listen on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Browns. He is Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns. I am Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants, and we are going to outline our respective teams' keys to victory. And Jeff, let's start with you.
Well, I think there's a couple things that, point out to me. Look, if I'm bringing up offensive line play, and it's not been where it's been in the past for the Cleveland Browns, worried about guys certainly like Dexter Lawrence, certainly Brian Burns, your other pass rushers for the, Giants. The Browns are going to be tested until this offensive line starts to look like, what has been, the standard here for this team. And I understand it's going to be an offensive line in flux. DeShaun Jones is now entrenched. He is going to be the right tackle from here on. You're not going to take what this young man has done to this point and move him, because the Browns do see a chance where they are going to get some financial relief on that offensive line by having DeShaun Jones there. On the defensive side of the ball, you have to kind of look at what Malik Neighbors does. And I don't think anybody's really surprised. I mean, the polish that he had at LSU, I don't know if it is just an LSU thing, but these guys are definitely emotional players. Certainly covered Jarvis. I've covered Odell. You see Malik Neighbors. You definitely see, some passion to him, the drop, and, basically didn't want to talk to him. I mean, nobody needs to be told you drop the ball and say, oh, attaboy. Look, players know what they do with, do right and what they do wrong. But he is going to be somebody. And I think the Browns, look, they have 3 good top corners. So you're going to show him Denzel Ward, who's a top corner in the NFL. You have a burgeoning talent in Martin Emerson. So if there's an opportunity for Martin Emerson to go out there, who's a little more physical, got a little more length, can beat on a guy, you're going to want to lean on the rookie a little bit. That's the way you do it. If you're going to line him up in a slot, Greg Newsome, he'll play some. Greg Newsome plays slot, So you want to keep mixing it up, certainly, on a player like that. And look, I think they're going to be extremely aggressive on Daniel Jones. Look, you don't have to just say, you say Jim Schwartz, it's going to be aggressive anyway. But, there's maybe difference where, hey, it's Patrick Mahomes. We can only be so much aggressive before it bites us in the can. Or it's Daniel Jones. You know what? I'm going to keep attacking him to make him prove that he can, basically make me pay for being this aggressive. They like to play man. They like to rush the passer. It's a simple thing. Obviously, Pat, his time in the Eagles, you've seen this in action plenty times. But those are the 2 biggest things: is controlling, certainly the New York Giants pass rush. And then if you're the Browns, and this is something they usually do pretty well, is we are going to take your best playmaker away from you and make you find another way to beat us.
Yes, indeed. And, you mentioned the pass rush with Daniel Jones. That's actually something that I'm interested in seeing play out. Now, the Giants offensive line, I said this on my show the other day. I said, Giant fans, if I had told you that the Giants offensive line would actually be ranked not in the bottom third, but actually a little higher, would you believe me? And I haven't checked the responses yet, but the Giants offensive line has been pretty solid. All right. Not top 5 just yet, but it's a case of all 5 guys. It's interesting. All 5 guys, you look at the individual performances outside of maybe Andrew Thomas, all 5 guys are playing, okay, passable, but put them together and they are getting the job done. And that's going to be so important because the Browns have a top 5 pass rush. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Browns are ranked in somewhere in the top 5 with total sacks. So that's going to be something, obviously, to keep an eye on. Can they protect Daniel Jones? Because look, when that rush comes at Daniel, he is known to panic. He is known to throw the ball away or to throw it into harm's, a window that he has no business throwing it into. So how is he going to respond to the pass rush if they are able to penetrate the offensive line? That's definitely something to keep an eye on. From the other side of the ball, I guess you can go the same way. Like you said, it all starts in the trenches. Now, the Giants pass rush so far has been kind of quiet. We haven't really seen Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns really come out and, set the league on fire. Sometimes it takes a little startup for that to happen. And then they say sacks and pressures and all that stuff come in bunches. But the Giants are going to need to get after that offensive line of the Cleveland Browns and get into the backfield, rattle DeShaun Watson or whoever ends up playing quarterback, and just, take away his options. Because look, the Giants' defensive secondary remains a big, big problem. It really does. They've got Deonte Banks, who's a good young player. Adoree Jackson will probably start now, especially if Cordell Flott is not healthy. If Nick McLeod is not healthy. But that group has been shaky, and they're, that it's just kind of how things kind of worked out with the Giants, to where, that front seven of the Giants defense has got to get after the passer and force some mistakes, because the longer these guys have to hold the ball and make plays down the field, the more likely the Giants are going to end up getting in trouble. So we'll have to see about that. And if they can, protect the back end of the defense. And then just real quick, we mentioned before about the Giants with the kicking situation. They have signed Greg Joseph to be their kicker with Graham Gano ailing. So just, thought I would throw that out there. But
Former Cleveland Brown.
Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like to me, Jeff, it's going to be a battle of the trenches that's going to going to determine this game. Would you agree?
I would think so. And, certainly, Giants have played obviously on the offensive line good to this point. The Browns hoping to get better in that aspect. So, it's certainly usually most of the time it kind of does come down to that. And then, as both quarterbacks have had their share of mistakes that have cost their team ball games, that's going to be certainly something else that we have to keep your eye on.
All right. Well, both teams need this win. It's going to be quite the clash. The Giants probably need a little bit more than Cleveland, but I'm sure Cleveland won't turn away a win. So, Jeff, you want to throw out a quick prediction before we say goodbye?
We usually save these for the end of the week, but look, it's inexcusable. This is a team in the New York Giants that are 0-2. The Browns last year only lost one game at home. They've already lost one game at home this year. They have the Dolphins later in the year. They have the Chiefs later in the year. They certainly have all their division opponents. I don't think this is going to be the one. I don't think the Browns are where they're going to play like clean and efficient yet. So you're going to get one of those, field goal combination scores. But if you wanted to say 26-13, 26-14, something like that. But the Browns like to get ahead, and then they like to go ahead and play their nickel and dime and just, rotate in pass rushers. And that would be the ideal plan for them, of course.
All right. Well, I said that if the Giants didn't win the first two games, I would have a hard time picking them to win. I got to see better football. I saw a little bit of improvement, just a smidge, some bright spots here and there, particularly on offense. But until this team shows me they can play complementary football, until they show me that, they can stop the run, I don't know that I can pick them. So I'm going to get the edge here to the Cleveland Browns. I'm going to say 28-13.
You can see it. Certainly can see it.
So we'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong. But I need a reason to believe. Giants, give me a reason to believe. So, all right, everybody. That is going to do it for this edition of Crossover Thursday. Again, he is Jeff Lloyd, host of Locked On Browns. I'm Patricia Traina, host of Locked On Giants. You can catch our podcast Monday through Friday on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll each have a new episode for you tomorrow on Friday. Hope you will check that out. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you again soon.